Hi, my name's Don. Welcome back to Project Urtle. In this episode we're going to be doing one of many small jobs which are really fill-in jobs. I'm still waiting for the body kit to arrive from Styromax. The delays are quite significant, and it's a direct result of the COVID epidemic that we're all working our way through at the moment. And it's not because of COVID directly, but because travel has been largely curtailed, certainly international travel and even travel between the states here in Australia. Many people who were taking overseas trips for holidays, retired people, etc., are sitting at home with itchy feet and nowhere to go. And this has created quite a boom time for the RV industry. Caravan manufacturers have got 12-month delays on delivery of new caravans. Caravan sales yards that deal in second-hand caravans and RVs, etc., are empty fields. They've all been bought out. There has been a huge increase in sales of RV and RV-related products. That has flowed through to orders for materials, components for that, and Styromax are experiencing very significant delays in being able to fill orders because of the size of their order book at the moment. So, in order to deal with that myself, I've decided to bring forward jobs that I would normally have wanted to do after I had the body built. So one of those jobs this time is to build the shower pan for the ensuite. It's a fiberglass shower pan, and this will show you how I got on and where I fell in a hole. So let's get to it. I chose to make the mould for the shower pan out of MDF. It's good material for this. It's uniform in thickness, it's flat, it's got a relatively dense surface which helps in making a mould, and it's relatively cheap. This mould is going to be a fairly quick and dirty construction. It's not intended to last. I'm not making a production run of these. It's just got to make one shower pan. So not a lot of strength or anything built into it. It's just going to be what it is, to do one job. The main thing to remember when you're building a mould like this is that you've got to be able to get the fiberglass piece that you're going to make on it off. So that means you need to think about some taper on the sides, so that the moment it starts to become loose on the mould, the glass will move away from the surfaces. Sometimes that's easier said than done. In this instance, I built the box square and then set a bevel on my disc sander, bench sander, and ran the box when it was finished past it multiple times until I had about a 2-degree slope on the side of it. At this point I need to confess that I forgot to video the next step, which was basically to coat the MDF mould using epoxy resin, which will give me a nice hard surface that I can sand smooth and flat. Okay, having sanded through the various grits, from sandpaper right down to 1200 grit, I'm now using rubbing compound just to take the last of the scratch marks from the sandpaper out. This should bring the surface to a reasonable level of shine. Okay, the next step, after rubbing a bit of a shine onto it, is to start building up a wax surface, which will allow the part made on the mould to release off. I'm using stuff called honey wax, which I'm told on the label is a mixture of hard waxes like carnauba wax. And we'll just keep building coats of wax, probably something in the order of 5 to 7 coats, which will try my patience. But it's well worth it. If you can get the part off without damage, you've saved yourself days of work. Okay, well, this is the second coat of wax on. It's just finishing off the polish off. You can start to see a bit of a gloss coming up on it, which is encouraging. Just this point here where this little disc is actually where the drain's going to run in, and the little dimple in the middle will just help me line up the hole saw when it's finished to cut the drain hole. But it's also a place that I can drill a small hole through the fiberglass part, through the shower base, and inject some compressed air into there if I need to get the part to separate off all this big flat area, which might be a bit difficult because it's going to be quite difficult to get a lot of pressure out in this area to lift when down the sides here are quite stiff and strong because of the geometry of it all. So that's my get out of jail free card. I can inject some compressed air in there and get quite a lot of lift happening if I need to. Well, those turned out to be famous last words. I'll come back to that in a minute. Hold that thought. Here I'm just putting on the first quick layer of gel coat. I'm just using an ordinary disposable paint roller, attempting to get a nice uniform coat of white gel coat over the whole of the mould. I later discovered that I had made quite a mistake using that particular roller. I'd rolled a lot of air bubbles into the gel coat, and I didn't particularly get enough gel coat on the surface. There were places where it was just too thin. Here I'm putting the second layer of glass onto the mould, having let the gel coat go off overnight. The first layer was woven cloth, and the subsequent layers I'm using chop strand mat. And it's not a terribly difficult process. It's just a matter of working the resin down into the cloth and working air bubbles out. If you listen in the background, you'll hear one of the lovely little summer thunderstorms we get around. Quack, quack, quack. Okay, well, had a bit of trouble. The mould I made out of MDF worked out fine. It was the right shape and everything, but and I waxed the surface of the mould with I think 10 or so layers, maybe only 8 layers of mould release wax, and that took almost all day, putting on a layer, buffing it off, waiting an hour, putting another layer, etc. When I came to demould the fiberglass shower pan, it wouldn't budge. It was stuck absolutely solid. I've never had a fiberglass job go quite so bad. And so I was left with one choice. I either threw the whole thing in the rubbish or try and reclaim it. So what I did was basically dig the MDF out of the inside of the shower pan here with hammer and chisels and grinders and all manner of implements. And then the last few millimetres of MDF I soaked in water and then blasted it off with the water blaster. So because that damaged it here and there, and because I didn't do such a good job of getting the fiberglass bonded to the epoxy, I ended up with some defects. Most of those defects were little air bubbles, voids between the gel coat and the fiberglass, and you can see some of them here that I've highlighted. I'm going to have to go back and repair those. And okay, well, that bit of body filler that we put in yesterday is set, and I've sanded it back, and now I've just used a little bit of spot putty to fill in some very small blemishes. I'll give that a sand out now, and we're just about ready to paint. As something of a distraction while I was repairing all the many faults that I found in the pan, I used some foam board to stiffen the sides. It's recycled polystyrene, extruded polystyrene foam. It makes a very nice board. It looks a little bit like MDF, but a lot lighter. And so I put some boards of that around the edge to keep the edge square, and then I flipped it over and filled the voids underneath the shower pan with expanding foam. And that's I just bought the stuff in a spray can meant for sealing up holes, etc. in your house, and that's not the most easy thing to get to sit uniformly. So I just filled it up and put a couple of layers on and filled the holes that I missed, and then sanded it off flush again. I was really just looking for a way of stiffening the bottom and filling the voids, make it easier to mount the thing. Okay, well, yesterday I finished up doing the repairs to the shower pan and sprayed on its first coat of 2-pack polyurethane, and so now that I've got a uniform colour all over, I can see a bunch of defects. Okay, places that I found porosity, little holes, etc. I've just wiped over some spot putty, and I'm just using a piece of 360 grit wet and dry sandpaper and a foam sanding block, and just wet sanding that back down. Okay, having finally found all the little voids and pinholes, etc., I gave it a quick sand all over to key in for the next and subsequent coats of polyurethane. I think I put 4 coats on after this altogether, and I was reasonably pleased with the result. Okay, so that's basically the shower pan finished, and it turned out okay. After all the dramas of not being able to get it out of the mould, I'm reasonably happy with it. So that's all for this episode. I'll catch you in the next episode where we'll tackle another small job while we're waiting for the body kit.